Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Transformed You. Mark DeJesus here with my amazing wife and co-host, Melissa.
Well, how we doing?
Today we're going to get into a subject that is stemming from our series on healing from toxic relationships. And as we were talking about this and processing through the subjects that people have to go through, we couldn't help but think about the life of the church, how it affects people, and we specifically we're thinking about the life of a pastor's heart. And I think that there's a lot going on in the life of pastors that doesn't get addressed, and it doesn't get addressed until a lot of times it's too late.
Yeah.
There's so many things that are happening and going on in the life of a pastor's heart, and some of it takes some unique understanding and some unique perspectives. And I've had a history of working in a large church on staff. We've also had experience pastoring a small church. And we eventually moved on into the work that we're doing now and helping writing materials, resources, and developing podcasts and books and teachings and coaching and training to help people live healed and free from the inside out. But this needs some specific addressing. So you've been married to me for many years. You came into my life when I was working at the large church, and then you were with me the whole time we pastored the small church. You've also watched me be involved with many churches that were going through splits, going through pastoral meltdowns, healings. There's strife going on. There's abuse going on.
And I had zero previous pastoral interaction before you and I got together.
Right. So what comes to mind first when you think of the subject healing for pastors?
First, what comes to mind is a caveat that I would like to add, that if you are a congregant / parishioner in the body of Christ, this podcast is not for you to send to your pastor, take notes for, or think you are the savior of. And I want to say that pretty strongly, because it usually doesn't come from, if your pastor needs heart healing or needs help, it usually doesn't come from someone being passive aggressive or manipulative in thinking they're the savior of their pastor or going to say, this is it, you need to listen to this.
Well said. A great way to really start this off in a healthy way and give some perspective, because that's just classic what people do. Hey, is a subject about...
You need to hear this. We have people that do that to us, you know?
Right.
So I just want to say that up front. Maybe that'll give some pastors maybe a sigh of relief. I don't know. But we've all had that happen to us. So I just want to make that caveat first.
Yeah, and our discussion today is not going to be like, here's the cookie cutter thing.
Right.
I think we're going to be as honest and authentic about this journey as possible, talk about some real factors, and really tune in to the life of a pastor's heart. Because I'm very concerned about the health of pastors, because I'm concerned about the health of the overall system of how church is structured. And the wineskin that we currently live in does not make way for valuing the health of the heart of a pastor. It's a whole lot more about numbers, performance, achievement, a success ratio that's not biblical success in the way God defines success. I think there will come a day where God will announce his perspective and what he deems as successful. And there's going to be people that are in our world in the back of the line that he's going to call to the front of the line. And I think there's going to be people that we consider unsuccessful, that God says, you were absolutely faithful with what I gave you. And so we're living in this spider web of all these factors that come at a pastor, that he has to either go, I got to be healthy and I got to work through no matter what these factors are. And I got to structure my life in an intentional way to be healthy for the long haul. And we don't do that typically. So we end up with these, oh my goodness, our pastor had an affair. Oh my goodness, a pastor is an alcoholic. Oh my goodness, a pastor has a sex addiction. Oh my goodness, a pastor did this. Oh my goodness. And we can go and judge it left and right. the core problem has not been addressed. And the core problem is we don't value the day-to-day health and life of the heart. And what we produce in many of our church cultures is a system that dismisses, pushes aside those things for a constant machine that you'll get some glitz and glamour. Man, when you start off young and you're going to go for it. But give it some time and the system will pull at your life of your heart because there's no time, there's no margin, there's pressures.
There's money involved, there's staff, it's a whole web.
Absolutely. So I think where we could start is this episode's really going to only be valuable for you as a pastor if you really value the life of your heart. We're not trying to be experts, but I've been through some stuff. We've been through some stuff. We've seen a lot. We've seen
more than we care to actually have seen in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and a lot of it we've actually had to do some healing from for how much it hit our emotions, it hit our journey. And so, but the goal is we want to be healthy. Melissa and I want to be healthy. That's our number one goal. Our number one goal is not to have a big ministry, have whatever. If those things happen, they happen. But not at the mercy of me being personally healthy. And do I need to explain what that means?
I think so, because I think that most pastors we meet think that they are moving in a healthy way, or at least they have a inner core intention of, let me just say it this way. I think a lot of pastors start out naively thinking, I'm going to do it different. I'm not going to do it like they did. I'm going to be different. We're going to be different. And eventually the system of church eats you up and you have to become part of it to be successful in a lot of ways. So I think the intention, I don't want to say all because I don't think all do. I think, there's a lot of different personalities and things that could be covered, but we don't have time for that. But I would say there are a lot of intention that you start out and you think you're going to be healthy.
Yeah. And then it slowly chips away.
Right.
And I saw that in my life because one of the biggest problems is that you are a broken person leading other people. And if you're like, no, that's not me, then stop the episode and move on.
Right, because if you can't acknowledge your own brokenness, that you're constantly in process of, right?
So think about this. You're coming into, and the Bible talks about certain, you have that certain qualifications, certain things that are metrics for discerning the maturity of somebody. So we're not talking about that. I'm talking about brokenness in that you have father issues, mother issues, you've got identity stuff. Most pastors don't have a true connection to the Father's love for them. They don't really know who they are apart from their pastoring. So if we take your pastoring away, it's complete nervous breakdown because you don't know who you are. I've gone through that and it was tormenting. It was like, wow, this is really, really difficult. I don't know who I am apart from this. And I got to discover that. So being healthy means having an awareness of what's going on in the life of my heart, not ignoring the symptoms that are going on in my life, recognizing when anger is getting off track, when anxiety is ramping up. For me, certain obsessive tendencies or certain patterns that I go, there's some things I need to just be aware of and let God invite, rather than just gotta go, the show must go on. The speed of life has to be ramped down a bit if you want to be healthy. That's the tough part because Sunday arrives every week. Wednesday is every week. So we live in this system where we move from one thing to the next, and it doesn't cultivate even people receiving heartfelt revelation of stuff because we're giving sermon after sermon after sermon. I remember when we pastored the small church for 6 years, we would have these amazing moments on Sunday. Whether it's something I shared or somebody in the church shared, there was the best Sundays was when there was just a corporate move, where this person brought this, and it was beautiful. And then what happens is the system wants to take over, and the next week it's like, okay, what's the next subject? What's the next thing? What's the next, teaching? Like, wait a second, what we got last week, that's our meditation for the week. we probably need to park there a little longer, right?
Right.
So we don't have time to like marinate on stuff.
No, and because of the culture that we're in, everyone's got addiction issues. There was a pull, and I see this a lot in so many ministries. We felt privy to it. That because you had a dynamic Sunday, you have to repeat that. You have to achieve the height of what you delivered to people every single week.
Yep.
Or it's not good. And honestly, people would be like, oh, last week was so good. And if it was mediocre, or didn't stir the big, Holy Spirit stir, they didn't get their hit.
Right.
And the pull to get that hit every week.
So here's what I think. I think that, and what you're saying is so important to recognize of what the culture is pulling from, right? Yeah. Every week. So then you enter a world where social media is there. You have access now to all the great communicators out there, the people that have the big crowds. And you're now, let's be honest, you're now competing for those places.
Right.
You're now competing in those arenas. And it's drawing people, it's drawing their attention, it's drawing their financial investments, and then you have this pull of comparison, right? Comparing you to them.
So true, right?
All these unnecessary.
Everyone's jockeying to be the voice. Sorry.
Yeah. And
yeah.
There's a subconscious insecurity that gets pulled on, and meanwhile we're trying to. It does seem like when you look at a pastor's job description, if you look at the typical pastor's job description, what we're really looking at is a religious CEO is what we're building up. Mm-hmm. Because the definition of a pastor, a true pastor, is a shepherd over people. He's aware of what's going on in the life of people. Once you get past like 10 or 12 people, you're no longer in touch with what's going on in their life. We're not able to. Jesus had his 12, and even amongst the 12, he had his 3, and even in the 3, he had the one guy that was like super close that everybody else was jealous of, right? John, the one who Jesus loved. So the system doesn't allow for that. So a pastor is really kind of in a CEO role. So then what we're doing is we're building a machine to build big. And what it does is it builds a machine that has to just keep going. The show must go on, and then everything becomes more on the shallow end, meaning that we have to we have to explain things in like hyped ways or cool ways. We've got to present it in ways. Be quick, be short. Don't preach too long. Say it in a cool way. And I'm not saying, this is the tricky part. I'm not saying I'm against that. What I'm saying is, I'm concerned about it because it doesn't produce long-term health. Because in every week, a pastor's coming up with something new to preach on, something new to say, another way to say it. And then you end up like having to just stay in that shallow end. And we are statistically producing shallow world disciples. It is being known in studies of what's coming out of these things. And even if you say, well, we have that small level, we have small group. And so even that level is very, very shallow, and there isn't much depth, right? So let me go back to the being healthy thing, right? It's like now I have to have a relational world that's sharpening me. And most pastors are very, very alone, and they can't be themselves with their congregants. The system doesn't allow that true transparency.
Right. Well, I think what's interesting, if I may just add this, that you and I have discussed a lot over the years, we bring it up still to this day, when you were going through your breakdown and years ago and really rediscovering your brokenness and trying to get healing, a major epiphany you had was all these people that were around you that you felt you had relationship with, you knew nothing. You really didn't have anything.
Yeah.
There was dinners and hanging out and choir practice, all these things that you were all together all the time, but you never really knew any of them.
That's correct. In 2006, we got married, and I'd left that church, and we started Turning Hearts from scratch. And there was a grieving of like, wow, I had all these people I was relating to, and now it was all gone. You know, it's and if you're a pastor and know this, you know when you leave a church, there's kind of these like things that happen
reveals where
people like they don't talk to you anymore, and then there's this like and then there's these kind of hidden rules of don't talk and interact and stuff like that, and that's not even part of the subject today. It just is what it is. And I felt that like emptiness, and then I was like, wait a second. As I started working on my life and getting healthier and getting out of ministry was in that way, in the day-to-day grind, was a gift to me. And I went and worked construction for a while in different phases, did some computer work and other stuff too, and during that time I was like, oh God, I thought you called me to something. And what he really called me was out to get clear in who I was. And in that, that's part of the journey. As I looked back, now knowing what better relationship can be like, safe, authentic, vulnerable, just what's possible. I look back and I looked at all the teams I had, the people I was in touch with. Right. We worked day to day, shoulder to shoulder. And I was like, they could be having mental health, addiction issues. Their marriage could be on the verge of divorce, and I would not have known. I'm telling you, I would not have known any of that because there was no room for it. It's like, come, we got to get this. Hey, thanks for coming on time. Appreciate it. Hey, all right, high five. And then
there was no room for them to be vulnerable either, not just for you to even like.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so then if they do have a problem, it's kind of like, well, let's outsource you out to a counselor.
I know this, right.
All these kinds of things.
Right.
So if I was to look at the overarching thing of healing a pastor's heart, a number of times pastors have heard me do talks, and they will say to me, I get what you're saying. One of the talks I'll emphasize is the difference between spiritual slavery and spiritual sonship. God calls us, you're not slaves. Get out of slavery. You're not in that. Paul said it. He taught on it, and the power of living in sonship. And I contrast the two, what they look like. And whether it's men's groups or church groups or whatever, they all go, yeah, I see it. To some extent, I see it. And they'll ask me, how do you apply this? Because I've got a church full of Marthas, nothing wrong with Martha, but I need to teach them how to be Marys, right? Which is the contrast, the story Mary with Jesus. And the point that I bring across is not, the thing that Mary was bringing out is not just spending time with God, spending time with people. Right. Because she was not sitting praying, because many people go, we need to spend time with Jesus. No, she was actually sitting in front of him. There was a person in front of her that she was giving attention to. Martha was doing a needed thing. And I think that's where the church is. The church is in the Martha zone. And Martha's angry, burnt out. She's looking over and she's ticked because she feels disconnected to God. She feels, you understand the metaphor I'm following here? And so he'll say to me, I see this. I got a church full of Marthas. And I said, well, you're going to have to restructure the life of your church around valuing the Mary part of life. How does that, what does that look like? And that's very sobering, because then it's like, well, we probably need to lessen our programs. We probably need to equip families, equip them so that in their homes, they're cultivating the life of Christ in their household, because the church can't replace what the family's doing. We also need our leaders to have a significant amount of time, more than the average person. I believe that typical pastors need more than just a day off a week. That's just my opinion. I think every pastor needs regular sabbaticals. Or it's just, I'm looking at the long haul. I don't care about this year. I don't care about the next 6 months or pandemic or all those kind. I'm looking for the long haul, because we come under all these pressures and all these things of what needs to get done. When you get healthy minded, you go, do we really need all those things?
Well, I think that, you brought up the pandemic, and I think that right now we're watching a lot of things. There's a lot when I'm looking at, Christian podcasts, I'm looking at a bunch of things. People are aware that there is something going on in the church right now. Okay. We have,
what do you mean by that?
Well, I think that we're being challenged in a big way on what we're going to look like and what we're going to be. And I think this is a good time to reflect and sit with, your spouse, your leaders, and really challenge a new perspective, because churches are having to close. We know a lot that are having to just completely shut their doors. When you're a small church, I don't know how we would have survived during this time right now. Right. And bigger churches, they can, they can manage right now, and especially if you have, an internet reach and all that stuff. I understand that you can survive, but do you want to just survive so that we can get through this? What can this look like to be a healthier body? Because I think we can all agree the church is not safe. We don't have a lot of safe people. Mental illnesses, we don't look a lot different from the world. And in a lot of cases, it's looking kind of yucky because the world doesn't want to be us. They don't. There's a lot of, there's just a whole, I think, rebuilding from the, huh? You're going to say something? Sorry.
No,
I think there's a rebuilding that can happen. I'm speaking out of my own frustration because I'm frustrated. Mark started off by saying we've seen the good, the bad, and the real ugly. It's been, in a lot of ways, really heartbreaking for us. And it's not a condemnation on these leaders that have done bad things. I'm frustrated over the system. I'm frustrated on how it has all kind of like gone into a business model.
Right. Which is understandable. I would say it's understandable. Yeah. But it's like it takes over. It's like it just takes over. And then we don't, like in our ministry journey, we've had numbers of times where somebody's like, if you'll do this, your numbers will go up and you'll do this. Come and do this whole thing. Like there's a pull, do these things, work these things, and you can go. And we sit back and we go, is that what we really feel that is best for where God is leading us and where he has us? And I don't think we even really ask that question anymore. We do whatever seems to work and we serve it.
Right.
Right. And so to what you're saying, let me give you an example of what she's talking about. How is it that we're seeing a system where a pastor will leave pastoring, which in many cases, many pastors need to do that. Yeah. Maybe you're just not called to it, and it's fine. Maybe you're doing it because you feel.
That could be a whole podcast, quite frankly, on how people even get into ministry, but we'll do that.
Yeah, because the typical church model, it took me decades to figure out that I didn't fit in that mold. It doesn't make me flow in the way that I'm wired the most. I'm now finally, after so many decades, being able to flow in how I'm wired, how God has made me, and be able to feel comfortable in that, right? So we're going in a bunch of different directions.
Yeah, we are.
But how is it that a pastor leaves pastoring and many don't ever go back to pastoring, which that's fine, don't continue in the faith?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Like, so before you think we're like hating on the church, we're being honest about what's
happening, right?
Right? So a doctor comes in and says, you've got congestive heart failure, It's like, man, doctor, you're really negative. Right? It's just, we're just bringing out some of the problems that are there. And I think pastors listening maybe give you a sense of relief of like, you're not crazy. What you need is you're going to need some very intentional things to walk in health for the long haul.
Yeah.
So when we ended pastoring, we actually closed the church. It was there's one main reason. Now there's probably 5 or 10 we could sit and talk and do a whole episode about. There's one main reason. I looked and I saw where this was headed and what kind of toll it would take on us and our family. And
it was already taking. We were already seeing.
So that's the being healthy, is being aware. Now we could have said, well, God's called us to, so he's going to, a lot of times people say, well, he's going to have to show me. it don't work like that. You're not going to give you like, you walk into your office one day and God, takes the dirt on the window and forms the word leave to give you that signal. We had to make a decision, and I the way I put the language is, God has not called me to sacrifice my family because I watched decades of ministry work, sacrifice the home for the sake of the crowd. And I think that's an ungodly sacrifice.
I think it's a horrific mindset that's on the church that somehow, I even struggled. I have to be honest. The greatest evangelist of all time is Billy Graham, right? And most people would say, yes, that's true. We live near the Billy Graham Library. We've been there many times. I absolutely love it. However, there is a part that I struggle with when you take the tour. And it's this, righteousness that they hold up of his wife, that she stayed home with all the kids while he was traveling the world. And I have to be honest, like, there's a part of me that struggles with that. That I have.
I understand.
Because we have watched many families be destroyed because the husband is gone 3 weeks out of the month ministering. And they're like, she's taking one for the team because she's home with the kids so that he can go serve God. It's like, no, she and the children should be first. And this messes with pastors. And I think you should talk about that, because there is this stigma and pride that the church comes first. And wow, what an amazing, strong woman that she lets her husband, like there's such a stigma over pastors on what is, the powerful right thing to do, to like forego the family so that you can minister to the flock. Like, don't you think that is over the church so badly?
Right. And I think that what I heard, I don't think that, I know that, what I heard was this value is, God, you've called me to this, you take care of my family. That's the language. I'm using exact language. And scripturally, I don't see that. I don't see that from an emotional health standpoint. So you said I should talk about that. I think that, well, for me, when we started, I was more in that state of like, we're going to change the world. We're going to go to the world. And then it's like, no, you're going to actually go work construction, and you're not going to do a whole lot of anything regarding that.
Well, can I make one caveat before you finish your sentence? The one thing that I would say you can apply to this conversation in your thoughts is that there was a shift made on, you wanted to minister out of who we were as a family and what you've been through.
Right.
So anyway, I just wanted to throw that in there because there was a shift that kind of took place with that during that time too.
Yeah, there was no more like, I'm going to teach stuff. It was, I'm going to my commitment was, God, I will share what you've helped me with. Mental, emotional, spiritual health, and freedom, and the health of the body of Christ with whoever you put in my path. Well, there were seasons where there wasn't anybody in my path, and so that frustrated me, and at times, I'm weeping over that, right? But it cut at how I get validation, and how I get approval, and how I feel loved, and for most of my life, it was performance is how I felt validated. So put me in a pastoral role at a young age, and I'm hitting the trails because it's feeding that. My message is good, feeds that. Oh yeah, I get a little applause when I'm talking. Yeah. I'll fire it up some more, and then the next time, and then the next time, and then this thing, and Pastor, you're great, and this, and it just feeds all these unhealthy areas. And underneath the surface is rejection issues and fear of man and fear of failure and shame that if people really knew me, they'd probably reject me because I'm not really that impressive. And all this like stuff under the surface, but none of that gets addressed. So when I began to have this awakening, and we make this, now we're newly married too. So we're trying to build marriage, and then Max came along. So in that process, the thing that God had to do was start really showing me, who are you? And I honestly admitted, I don't know who I am. I don't have a clue. And sometimes hitting that rock bottom, because I always talk about going back to the basics, back to the fundamentals. Because it comes out of that. Who loves me? Who am I? And what's the grace of God flowing in my life? It's just simple. Everything's so complicated nowadays, right? What's your system plan? This is the thing. It's like, good night. So anyway, the value system that came as I began to look at those scriptures is that really all ministry begins first with yourself and God. Now, this may not be your journey, but I find that when I tell this to a lot of pastors, they echo it. My journey, there wasn't much room for me and God. And that may be a surprise to people that haven't been in full, a leadership capacity. They're like, how dare you? Like, yeah, during many, many seasons, there wasn't much Bible reading unless it was a sermon prep. There wasn't much prayer because it's from the moment you wake up throughout the day, and then you're going to have interruptions at night. So when you're trying to have dinner, the phone's going to ring, text, and nowadays, texts and this and that, it's like all these things going on, the pull, and then the emotional weight of it, right? So I realized that I want to first create a lifestyle where I'm connecting to God, and I realized I had to fight for space to connect to that. Now, out of that, I haven't even gotten to ministry yet. It's you, right? It's my wife. Is that our time together is fruitful, that I'm present, because I had a hard time being present in the moment. I'm thinking about that pressure. I'm obsessing about that thing, being present in the moment, right? And then making sure that my kids get a full part of me. They get Mark full, not Mark empty. So I would notice there are days where it'd be patterns of I'm empty towards you, empty towards the kids. You're getting the fumes, right? Because I'm just tired and worn out. And I realized that's where heart health awareness goes. That's a problem. That's not going to be my value system. I want to be full for my wife, full for my kids. And people get the flow of that, right? And so I reverse engineer that value. At the end of the day, I want my family to get the best of me. Now, you have your work hours, you have things, okay? I have a schedule. But even way back then, I want to work from that place where if my wife is going through something, it's not an inconvenience.
Right.
Right? So can I just be like honest? Because for men who are pastors, the subconscious thing, if your wife's going through something, it's like, can you just get it together so this doesn't get inconvenient? All right? This is the honest podcast. If you want like polished stuff or whatever, this isn't the place. But that's the honest thing that goes on. And so men have been sacrificing their wives, and wives are taught like suck it up for the team. And like you brought up the Billy Graham illustration, and it's like we're not speaking against Billy Graham.
No.
Right?
Because
we honor what they did.
Right.
What we're doing though is just recognizing things that the next generation needs to be aware of. Because we go. You have an invitation to go somewhere, you go. You don't go, wait a second, do I really need to do this? And like even today, people ask me, do you come and do a speaking engagement? I said, well, I don't really like doing the dog and pony, like, hey, you're going to do a talk and walk out. I do it. I'll do it for certain things. But I'm like, I like to do more investments, build relationship, those kind of things. That becomes intentional, right? But there's we kind of serve the current machine without stepping back and going, what does it look like? So this is what we did. We decided we don't want to live like victims, because the system will swallow you up and eat you, and then it will make you as a pastor a victim. And you come out of it and you're irritable, you're angry, you're resentful, you're hating the church, you're hating the church structure, you're hating the church people, and at times hating God.
And isn't there, I believe there was just a study done, if those of you know it, you can post it, about the children of these pastors are now not serving God because they, it's getting like exponential.
Right. And don't get condemned if you're a pastor and your kids, are not serving God, whatever. It's for just awakening and recognition. It's hard work raising your kids in the faith. Like, it's hard work.
It's hard work being like living anyway with heart intention, whether you're in pastoral work or not. So listen, I know we're not promoting the easy road. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit more challenging to live with intention and to live from the heart. Mm. It's not for the faint of heart, and I believe that's what when the Bible speaks about the remnant in end times. It's not for the faint of heart, but man, is it such a better and more fruitful way to live?
And I think health also looks at like how the church does life together. Because I saw the bigger side. I've seen the bigger side, what that requires. Then I saw the smaller side, and there's something really interesting in what happens in the smaller side when you equip people. And what we attempted to do with our church is equip people that when we gather, the gathering is all of us bringing who we are into the room. This is not coming. Now, there was a fight. It was, and I was fighting this, where they wanted to come to church, stand up and have a nice worship time, and then Mark's going to give us a really good teaching today. And I fought that because it was like, nope. And sometimes we would have awkward Sundays. Mm-hmm. Where I go, so what do you guys got today? And they're like, what?
We're calling random people up to, we will be so stressed out coming to service.
Because what I saw is that when I read the Bible, I read the body really edifying one another, and I don't see the model of filling a room with chairs with a platform in the front
and a superstar, right?
I don't see that model. I see relationship. I see fathering. I see just being involved in people's lives and in a good way, right? And the body sharing. Now, I know that model of like people standing up, dreamy. Sharing.
It's a dreamy vision.
It's harder work. It's easier. It's easier to just go sit down, be quiet. I have a message to give, and then you're going to go home. That's easier, and I get it. And at the end, that was one of the struggles. Is I was like, we're flowing right back into that same kind of structure where each Sunday I'm
well, because it's easier, and we would get heartbroken, because when you start pressing into like, let's deal with each other heart to heart, let's love each other in all of our yuck, it's really messy. And I understand why pastors go, can we just be in the system? Can we just, let's just do it the way it's been done. Yeah. Because it's hurtful and it's hard, and people leave and they don't want to do it. It's really difficult. So do you think that it's possible to live, to be a pastor and to be really healthy and be like run an organizational church? Because I will say this, right? Like, you've been in the system. I pastored with you, we pastored for about 6 years. And so I got a taste of that. And, I've seen a lot of the stuff that you've been part of and helping, pastoral teams and all those kinds of things. So I've seen a lot. And there is a slight part of me that when we hear, well, this pastor said, that's it, I'm done, I'm resigning, like, I get happy for him. I'm like, you know what? Good for you that you're getting out of the system. And I'm saying that in a heartfelt way of good. Like,
maybe you'll figure out who you are now.
Oh, yeah, figure out who you are. And I don't know. Anyways, I'm kind of rambling a little, but go back to my question. I don't know if you want to answer it, but do you think it's possible to be healthy?
It's going to have to be very intentional, and everything you do in your church comes out of your value systems. I'm not talking about the value systems you have on your wall, like we value this, we value. Usually those are like kind of doctrinal, or they're like philosophical, or I'm not talking about even your job descriptions, because most pastors, when they have a job description, it says, have a healthy home, it's a thing on the list, so that if you ever need to use it, like, you're supposed to have a healthy home, and all of a sudden, what's going on? It's more than that. It's what does life look like? It doesn't match the corporate push, because the corporate push is you've got to push this thing and work so hard. And here's what happens. This is I don't know if I'm answering the question or not by going in this direction. There are many ministries where you see a achievement success. Maybe it's getting famous. Maybe it's records. Did I say records? Albums.
Whoa.
Albums, music. They get a big following or whatever it is, or they're a big Instagram or whatever happens, right? So what happens is there's like this, wow, God's blessing it, right? That we kind of just flow in, because we have an equation of if God blesses it, it will grow big in numbers, big and flashy. That's what God's blessing. And the subtle thing is if it's not, God's not blessing it, right? So we get in this like back and forth battle. The problem is when you fall into that, sometimes that kind of success concerns me more than anything else. Because you get into a point where stuff just starts working for you. And then here's the tricky thing. When you're not dealing with your heart, the character issues come out and you can dabble in them and the success is still there. Okay.
Right.
So this is why I say this.
I know the analogy you're going to use. Go ahead.
I say this in coaching sessions with pastors or people. It's why a pastor can have an amazing night and then that night get a prostitute.
Right.
And the next night have a great meeting. Now that hits against, like, many Christians don't even know where to place that, because God's gifting will work.
Right.
It will still happen in the midst of our flaws, in the midst of our things. But those areas will take us out in the long term.
Eventually, right. Yeah.
And if the enemy can't get because, the sexual things, the addiction things, those things come out from unaddressed wounds of the heart, rejection wounds, father wounds. It's not because you don't have enough accountability partners. Sorry, it's not. It's because of unaddressed wounds that are looking, at the end of the day, you're unfulfilled, you're empty, and you're looking for a hit to fill the emptiness, because the performance world doesn't work, right? It doesn't fulfill your life. It will not. And you may be impressive. And so then you get to a point where you just start doing stuff and there isn't a sense of, should I be doing this? No one's asking, should we be doing this? Because it works. You have numbers or you have budget, so you assume God wants this. And that gets concerning, because it's like, do we step back and go, yeah, but, I'll see my wife less. Yeah, my kids will get the leftovers. Won't be focused, won't have my full attention. So being healthy is getting clear on what God is really calling and getting very clear on what is he calling you to sacrifice. Because most of the time there's a subconscious sacrifice that God's not calling, and then you end up with a resentful wife and you go, honey, I'm talking from a model of a man in ministry and his wife. I understand that there's women in ministry. I get all that. And then she's resentful, and you're like, why are you resentful? Like, husbands, if you're in ministry and you notice resentful things of your wife, don't go, honey, just get it together, get a counselor and work on this. Pay attention. That's like red light. Like that's showing there's issues of intimacy that need to be addressed. And at the end of the day, I've said to you, the whole world can, as far as like ministry work, can fall off a cliff. If we have to take some time to work on you and I, let's do that.
Right.
I don't know. I don't even know if I answered your question. The question being, can you be healthy in the midst of this? Yes, but it would take a very intentional, you can't just put it on automatic pilot. Because automatic pilot is, you got Sunday service, got to be amazing, got Wednesday Bible study, prayer, you got all
if you
these
want
things.
a mega ministry, I'm sorry, there's a sacrifice here to be made on what the value is for your life and your heart.
Yeah.
And I know people don't want to hear that. Trust me, like, we tried it. We were going to be different. Heart stuff is messy. It just is. Building and finding covenant relationships, safe people, you got to go through yucky, junky stuff. I'm not here to sugarcoat that this is like, it's going to be so amazing. Just even getting down to, okay, my wife and I are not praying together. My husband and I are not praying together. We're going to work on that. That's going to bring out a whole ton. Like there's so many things when it comes to getting to the life of the heart. How can our family be healthy? And then ministry ultimately flowing out of that. I don't hear anyone using that language. And that is crushing my heart when it comes to the church, because your children are suffering. The people in your church are suffering because they're not getting, in a lot of ways, for me, what I think church can be when you're heart connected, that you can come and hear those things. The best messages you give, which is most of them, which is out of what you have been through. And people see that. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate the comments of people. They know this dude has been through some stuff, and you minister out of those things. And to me, that's the most powerful. But it's not an easy road to get to that point. I understand that just going with the system is easier. It just is.
Can I give a part 2?
Please.
Answer to, I just had a thought come to my mind.
Please do.
So you said, can a pastor be healthy in the system? So there is something in business that business people do that is a part of quote unquote success, but it's also streamlining and being efficient, right? Is this getting very clear on what they do well and not fussing over things. So
great point.
You could go into a lot of business models, and this is where sometimes the church could learn from business world. You see certain companies, they're like, yeah, we don't do that. We do this. We make computers, we don't make cell phones, or we make this kind of car, or we don't do that. This is what we make high-end, high-quality cars. No, we don't make inexpensive cars. Or we make budget-friendly, products and materials. I think what I've never gotten a really great answer is when I sit down with the church, I say, what's your strengths? What's the grace over this church? Now we're getting healthy. Because when you flow into the world system, you get into striving. I got to burn the candle on every end. The Christian life is difficult. It's hard. It's challenging. Paul showed it. The apostles showed it. But you see them pay attention to the grace. The grace is what God is doing. It's his power working in and through us. And the apostles were always talking about that. His power, we're yielding to that power, that grace, the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of the Father working in us. They were always tuned into that so that you pay attention to what God is doing. Now, on a typical church, there's a grace. The grace is, this is something God is doing in that church. What I see is cookie cutter churches with just different theological emphasis versus some churches have amazing in a certain area. And it's like, that's where the grace is, meaning that when you put your energy to it, there's a flow, there's some alignment. Doesn't mean there isn't hardship and there isn't struggle, right? But there's a flow, or maybe there is a teaching element that other churches and people around the country, around the world glean from, and that's where the grace is. Understandable. And so that's something to get clear on of what, so that you put your energy to the grace and you go, yeah, we don't make cell phones, It's people would say to me, they say, we need a men's ministry, we need a women's ministry. All right, if the grace is there, we'll talk about it. I don't see the grace there, do you? I kind of see it this way in what we're doing. What's happening. I'm open to interpretation on that. Right. A lot of times what we would do is we would have men and women together, and we would talk about the men issues and the women issues together, and then we would split them up, and then we'd bring them back together. We would have certain seasons of certain things, and I think that it takes more work rather than the autopilot. Here's our sermon schedule for the rest of the year. If that's the grace on what's happening, fine. But I think tuning into that will be healthier, because then we start going, wow, God, you're really doing this. And I think so many people are finishing the end of the day going, oh, wow, I'm exhausted. Look what I had to do today.
Yeah, it's very true. Okay, so the one thing that I would like to ask you to speak into that you and I have found to be a big problem because of pride, lack of safety, is where pastors can begin to get help. They can say, with humility, I'm not sure where to turn, what to do next. If there's a pastor or someone listening right now in ministry that's like, what do I need to do next? What would you say to them? Well, I'm burnt out. What do I do?
Well, I think pay attention to the signals. Don't ignore it. Pay attention to the signals. When you're driving in the car, there's two kind of drivers, right? And you'll attest to being one of them. I know which one you're gonna. Okay, there's two types of drivers. There's the driver that when the signal comes on the dashboard, the check engine light. There's the first kind of driver that goes, I got another 70,000 miles, whatever. Lights going on, other lights are going on. I'm good. Keep driving, right? And there's the other kind of driver, the check engine light comes on, and they go, oh my goodness, the engine's going to fall out. It's going to fall through on the ground, and I'm gonna drive off this side of the road.
You're telling me that's me. How dare he?
At times, you're like, is this?
Listen,
and I'm like,
I've had enough tragic things happen.
We'll look. So, what's the best way? Oh, I notice it. I'm not ignoring it, and I'm paying attention to that. If that doesn't happen, then you'll find ways to work around it. So then, my first practical recommendation is find someone that has nothing to do with your church culture that can be a voice of influence for the life of your heart. They're not going to be impressed by your sermons or whatever. They're just going to look in safety, in love, and it's probably going to have to start with some kind of paid setting with a therapist or counselor or coach or something like that.
I think that is one of the most massive issues for pastors right now.
Yeah.
They think it's a weakness to have to go because pastors are held as the highest authority, dude. I know people do, but I'm sorry. I think it's worse for pastors because they're held to the highest spiritual authority and they believe it. And it would be to them a mark on their record, a shame if they went to go, I need help. I think that most will not do it.
Yeah, it's like
I'm serious.
It's like when you and I went to a marriage conference and somebody I knew was texting me. I said, "Oh, I'm at a marriage conference," and the reply was, "Is everything okay?"
Right.
Like
we're there to sharpen who we are. Like
everything's fine.
But I think most pastors know that, so they're creeping in. They're hiding. They're putting their hoodie over. I don't want anyone to see me here. Because
true.
Somehow it marks that there's weakness. There's something about being a pastor that there is a mystique of Superman.
That breaks my heart.
I remember the first time I realized this is when you and I got together. And I was so naive, let me tell you. I was like, everybody loved you. I thought the church was amazing and the church body's going to love me. It was this whole thing. Anyways, you were going through what you were going through at the time and a lot of upheaval and all that. And they kind of looked at me in a like demonizing way of the woman, that came that changed you in a little bit. And someone kind of came up to not confront me, but be a little passive aggressive to me about you and how amazing you were. And I got so irritated at how they were elevating you.
Right.
I said, that like he goes to the bathroom like everyone else.
Right.
And I am not kidding. This is her response to me. She said, "Oh no, it's different."
We told you we're not lying.
And
to
I
you.
was like,
these are actual.
Whoa, that was such a huge eye opener for me on how.
Yeah.
I mean, like we have sat in rooms with people where they talk about pastors like they literally are Jesus Christ reincarnate. Like they can do no wrong. And the fallout that happens when something goes wrong with the pastor and the devastation that ripples through the church because he wasn't this perfect representation of Christ that people thought he was. And I really think that thing needs to be dealt with because it's preventing pastors from going, I got some stuff to work on.
Right.
Because I have to keep this facade up. No one can see a crack in the facade.
Right. Yeah, because no pastor is immune from battles in their thoughts, battles with depression, discouragement.
And here's the thing. I get it. The church is not safe. I am not here to tell you, listen, you can tell everybody you're getting help and da-da. No.
I don't want.
We know.
I don't know that I want to say in absolute the church is not safe.
No, I'm saying most people can't be trusted to hear,
right.
Which they don't need to know. People are having marriage issues or whatever. But like, what's the line of like being transparent, being that pastor that's vulnerable, not being afraid to go, yeah, we're working on some stuff. It's a fine line too,
Yeah, it is.
I don't have the perfect answer for it. I'm just kind of, like flushing it out as we're talking.
Leadership needs to have a value for health, and there needs to be a cultural permission for people to be themselves. So I think the odds are better if when you're having your gatherings, a pastor doesn't have to turn it on.
Yeah.
So in my upbringing, it was bent towards the Pentecostal and at times charismatic. Those kind of cultures can be very where you gotta get like a response from people. There becomes this rhythm and cadence you develop in your speaking, and the people feed off of it. So then this fabrication forms. In some other, maybe more in other streams, of Christianity, it's the super professional, and you have to be aware of the fabrication you have. What's the fabrication? And for me, it was like just superb excellence, God's moving every time, I'm doing something, intensity. And then the first round of healing for me was I started to let go of that. And I saw God move in really cool ways. So like, I remember back out before we left that church in 2006, I was overseeing the music ministry and a bunch of other departments. I was overseeing the youth ministry as well too, and I was seeing church productions and all that. And so I'd go into choir rehearsal, and I would just go, I just want to share this one little thing God's doing in my life. Just take 5 minutes. Next thing you know, an hour later, we're all on our knees weeping in God's presence. And we never got to rehearse that day. And I'm like apologizing, like, sorry, I was just sharing something, right? So I didn't know like how to fit in this, because I'm like, if we're going to be together, let's really be together. Let's see what happens. And so that renovation in me was major, because for the most part, it was like the pressure. I got to. What do I got? And then I just learned to be myself. Mark as a son, loved by my Father in heaven. Not just a cliche, not just a theory, not just something I can write on a Facebook page. Something I began to like investigate in my heart. Because I'm telling you, most believers don't have a regular connection to the love of the Father in their life. And because when I ask, and my work behind the scenes, it's true. And I'm right there. And there's a lot of friends I know, the same thing, right there. Like that takes real guts to go, you know what? I really want to be myself.
Yeah.
Because you're groomed in life to be a role, and then your energy and activity is keeping that role intact. Problem is that's draining, and you're not really you. And so then you're like, where are my relationships without that role? So like I had to grieve the idea that if I'm not helping someone or ministering to someone, and I don't have anything that I'm offering them in that moment, do I still have a friend?
Right.
And I'm not hating on them. What that's realizing in me was that's how I related to my world, was solely through that. Mm-hmm. And so I had to learn how to be myself. That's why even in this podcast, we do very little editing of it. We clip things here or there or whatever, but we just we're just going to have conversation and share, because there's plenty of like polished and everything, but it feeds that fabricated system.
Right.
And it's like, no, we've had the aching of weeping with people who've been so deeply broken, have been in pastoral roles and have been shattered while the world goes on, and they're left with years of investment. And there's unique pains that come about. You're leading a church which is mostly volunteers. People go there because they choose to. Unless you're like a cult and super spiritually abusive and you guilt everybody and control them to come there, right? And with that comes a heavy price where at any moment they could just go, I'm leaving. Really? 17 years of relationship and you're leaving? That's it? Yep. Move on. And you're supposed to just like, you take that hit in the gut and it knocks the wind out of you. And you're supposed to just come back and just start breathing again, go back to normal. And then, hey, what happened to so-and-so? Well, they got the wind knocked out of them 58 times, and the 58th time knocked them out, And so all to say that I had to, going back to when I was like, I want to learn how to be myself. So I started shedding off a lot of things. And then just going back way, I go on tangents, but I find my way back.
Hey, listen, I'm the queen of tangents. So
it goes back to the leadership creating that we're going to be ourselves. So I'm not going to be flashy for you or try to be something for you. And I'm going to give you permission to be you and learn and grow. Now, if you can't handle my journey and growth, then that shows I can't open up that vulnerable place to you because you're not safe in that area. No offense, no big deal, because a pastor can't just let out all his garbage to everyone in the congregation, right? Actually, very few. There has to be a long period of time for people to show they are proven to be able to handle certain levels of information and certain insight. It takes a lot of maturity. It takes a lot because most people go to quick judgment.
Right. And there's a badge of honor that people wear in the church. Oh, I'm close to Pastor so-and-so. I was over his house for dinner. There's like almost a Hollywood thing that gets put on pastors of who's close to the pastor that pastors have to deal with,
Right.
Of who to trust.
Right. So where do we go with this?
Oh, man, where do we go?
So I think that...
Because we covered a lot of things.
The first thing is that, the value for health.
Yeah.
And then... because it's not going to be like you setting a policy in your church. God's got to do a renovation in you. And that's what happened in my life. And the thing that happened for me though, is it changed everything. It was like, man, I can't do church life like this anymore. Like I can't, now that I'm awake, I see the patterns I fell into in every area of my life. And that's going to change. And I remember talking to a small group of people that were meeting, and I just had the opportunity in that church. I had the opportunity to testify. And I was like, I want you all to know that you've seen this part of me, but I've had a lot of struggles. And here's what God brought me to. And the room, like, leveled the room because they were like, and it was good because they were like so grateful. And it put in perspective their battles. Because I was like, yeah, I'm riddled with anxiety. A lot. I have panic attacks. Depression hits me hard. I've heard some pastors do that and some of them get fired.
Right.
I've heard some pastors do that and it creates a ruckus. In that moment, the grace opened up in people and they were grateful. Thank you. Because I can finally relate to a pastor. And it opened that up. So there is a risk in you being yourself. At different levels, in the stories you share and what you're going, there is a risk. And there are times people won't handle it well. And it's there you have to make the decision of, I'm not telling you to just like unpack all your baggage every Sunday, but you have to make a decision of how do I want to live healthy before God and not serve the demands and pressures. That takes heavy work.
Yeah.
But if there's a cultural work, hey, this is who we're going to be, then you're pointing to an outside standard, right? If that makes sense. It's like this is what God is calling us to live like. So now you're not just saying, well, this is my opinion, you need to do this. It's like, I'm accountable to this standard too. This is how we're going to be. And there's books like Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, things like that are become more and more churches are like, okay, we're all going to go through this because we all got to work through our issues. That can be helpful too. But I think if you've left and you're no longer pastoring, you need to let more time happen than you think to allow the healing process, because you're going to need to figure out some things about who you are. And some of you may realize, hey, I'm not, like me, I'm not called to be a pastor in the institutional church model. Now, I pastor people now probably more effectively than I ever have, because it's often in a structure of taking time to work on things, communicating, staying in touch, being mindful. I don't have the distraction of all these things going on because I'm more centered in. And I'm centered in on my grace too. And what does it look like, the grace that's on me, and how do I flow in that? But that comes out of identity. Like, I no longer feel like I need to be like what people pressure people in ministry to be. Because I've not arrived, but I got a glimpse of who I am. And I'm now moving more and more towards building that.
Yeah.
No, the one thing that I want to encourage, if you're listening to this and you're feeling stirred and you don't know where to begin, the one thing that you and I initially instituted was taking sabbatical time. And I think if you are currently pastoring and you're burnt out and, you know, everything that's going on worldwide right now, I know is stressing everybody out in the church too, on, you know, how many people can you have? It's a whole thing. Sitting down with those who you are accountable to, your board, deacons, what have you, sitting down and saying to them, listen, I'm recognizing some things. I need to take some time. And off the jump, you know, you put that in place, and I was very grateful. And it took time because it was awkward, like to go, I'm not taking a phone call. I'm not responding to emails. We are going to simply focus on our hearts, what's happening in our family. And I think that can be a great way to start and say, okay, this is what I'm called to do, but I want to make it healthy, and we're going to do this once or twice a year. I think twice a year at least, so that you're constantly being refreshed and looking at your family and looking at what the needs are of your family first, and then being able to maneuver through your church life.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that I was grateful for, the church I worked at where we met, I am grateful that there was a structure where you could kind of work your own schedule. So like one of my roles, most of my evenings were taken up with, like, there was certain prayer meetings or choir rehearsals or musicians practice or these things. So then I had the opportunity to create a lot of margin in other areas, maybe in the morning of the next day or things like that. That I want to encourage pastors, be in the driver's seat of your schedule. Don't let your schedule drive you. You know, make appointments that you have on your calendar that are for, you know, I make appointments for things where it's like you and I sitting down, or it's like, this is a time, it's an appointment I booked with myself to just sit and be, right? And nothing else can take that. And then you learn to appreciate who you are so that God's grace will flow. And then you're not, it takes maturity though. It takes emotional maturity, not get hung up on all the stuff that gets pulled and the demands. You know, many churches have a structure where there's constant, you know, people can call at any time and these emergencies, and you got to be there, and it's unrealistic. It's like they expect you to be 911 and be responding to that. And it's just not healthy. And I question as to whether God's called us to be all those things. So any other thoughts?
No.
I think if I was to look at a resource, I would recommend the Heart Healing Journey. But if I was to, if you're really serious about this and you go, man, I want to work on these areas, I would really encourage the book, Exposing the Rejection Mindset. And I'll tell you why. Because this gets at the root system that will infect everything in your life. This area is why everybody falls into our addiction patterns, our relationship issues, our burnout. I get into performance-driven Christianity, all that stuff that's going on. This will help you get clearer on the root system of how you find love and how you find validation, how you find worth. It may just be as simple as going, you know what, I need to get to know the heart of the Father. And I created a simple resource, Experiencing God's Love as Your Father, to be able to walk you through that and to be able to experience it in a fruitful way. So anyway.
I would say those two, if I could just add, for those of you that are looking for someone to speak to get coaching and some mentoring and just heart healing in, you are looking for people who want to do an invested work. And so if you're looking for that, go to marktojesus.com, and there is a button where you can look for personal help.
Yeah, it's a help button there that you can click on. It's got all the information. And yeah, I look at the people that apply, and I really prayerfully consider, okay, God, is this somebody that you want me to invest in? Because I'm looking for people that really want it way more than I do for themselves, and want to be heart healthy. And God will meet you in that. But I find it does take steps, and it does take the willingness to go, I want to live this. But if you're serving success, if you're serving fame, if you're serving looking like you have accomplished a lot of things, those things will take over. And so kind of starts with like a sober awareness. So we hope that our raw conversation can be helpful for your journey and be a blessing to your life. And if these resources are an encouragement to you, consider a one-time donation or a monthly subscription, a monthly partnership to help support the resources and materials. And we're doing the best that we can to encourage people to live healed, freed, and transformed. So thank you so much, everyone. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Thank you.